The security guard hesitated when Maya Johnson presented her Bar Association ID at the courthouse entrance. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right place? The public defender's office is in the basement," he said, eyeing her cheap briefcase. Maya smiled quietly, knowing that in exactly 30 minutes she would turn Judge Harrison's world upside down. The morning air was thick with humidity as Maya walked through the marble corridors of the Harrison County Courthouse. Her second-hand shoes clicked softly against the polished floors, a stark contrast to the expensive Italian leather that surrounded her. At 28, she had learned to navigate these halls of justice with a quiet dignity that masked years of fighting battles others couldn't even imagine. Maya had arrived early for the most important case of what everyone believed was her short legal career. She carried herself with a confidence that seemed to contradict her thrift store suit and worn leather briefcase held together with electrical tape. The other attorneys in the marble hallway whispered among themselves, their voices carrying the kind of casual cruelty that wealth and privilege often breed. "Is that really the best they could send for a case this important?" whispered Patricia Morse, a senior partner at Wellington & Associates, to her colleague Thomas Richardson. Her diamond earrings caught the morning light as she shook her head in disbelief. "She looks like she just graduated from some community college law program. Poor thing probably doesn't even realize what she's walking into." Thomas adjusted his $3,000 suit and smirked. "Harold is going to eat her alive. This will be over before lunch, mark my words. Williams Industries is paying us 7 figures to make this discrimination case disappear, and here they send some kid who probably can't even afford decent legal briefs." Maya heard every word but kept walking. She had heard worse, much worse. What these people didn't know was that behind her modest appearance lay one of the most brilliant legal minds of her generation. A mind that had been carefully hidden for reasons that would soon become devastatingly clear to everyone in that courthouse. Judge Robert Harrison was a legend in the legal community, and not always for the right reasons. 58 years old, with perfectly styled silver hair and an imposing presence that filled any room he entered, he had presided over some of the most high-profile cases in the state for over 2 decades. His courtroom was his kingdom, and he ruled it with an iron fist wrapped in judicial robes. But Judge Harrison was also known for something else, his complete intolerance for what he called incompetent representation, and his particular disdain for attorneys who didn't fit his narrow idea of what a lawyer should look like. Young lawyers, female lawyers, and especially black lawyers found themselves facing not just opposing counsel in his courtroom, but the judge himself. "Have you seen the docket for today?" Judge Harrison asked his clerk, Margaret, as he reviewed the morning's cases in his chambers. "Williams Industries discrimination case. They're being represented by Harold Wellington, of course. Excellent attorney. But look at this." He pointed to Maya's name on the paperwork. "The plaintiffs are represented by some nobody I've never heard of. Maya Johnson, probably fresh out of law school and in way over her head." Margaret, who had worked for Judge Harrison for 15 years, had learned to navigate his prejudices carefully. "Should I suggest she might want to request a continuance, Your Honor? Give her time to prepare more thoroughly?" No, Judge Harrison waved dismissively. "Let her learn the hard way. Sometimes the best education is a public humiliation. Maybe it will encourage her to find a more suitable profession." The case that morning involved Williams Industries, a manufacturing giant with over 50,000 employees nationwide. The company was accused of systematic discrimination against black employees in hiring, promotion, and compensation practices. The allegations were serious, pattern discrimination that had allegedly kept hundreds of qualified black workers out of management positions for over a decade. Harold Wellington himself would be representing Williams Industries. At 62, he was arguably the most expensive and successful corporate defense attorney in the state. His fees started at $500 per hour, and his track record was nearly spotless. In 30 years of practice, he had lost only 3 major cases, and none of them involved discrimination claims. Harold arrived at the courthouse in a custom Mercedes, followed by 2 junior associates carrying boxes of legal documents and a paralegal with a laptop bag worth more than most people's monthly salary. His confidence was absolute. The case file showed that the plaintiffs were represented by a solo practitioner named Maya Johnson, someone he had never heard of in all his years of practice. "This is almost unfair," Harold remarked to his lead associate, Jennifer Walsh, as they set up their table in the courtroom. "I've spent 6 months and $1 million preparing for this case, and they send some public defender. I almost feel sorry for her." Jennifer looked across the courtroom at Maya, who was quietly organizing a single folder of documents. "Should we offer a settlement? I mean, if she's as inexperienced as she looks, maybe we can get them to take pennies on the dollar." "Let's see how the morning goes," Harold replied. "Sometimes it's better to let incompetence reveal itself publicly. Makes the next case easier to settle." What neither Harold nor Judge Harrison knew was that Maya had spent the better part of 2 years preparing for this moment, not just preparing the case, but preparing to reveal a truth that would shake the very foundations of how the legal community saw talent, competence, and justice. When Judge Harrison entered the courtroom, the familiar ritual began. All rise. The Honorable Judge Robert Harrison presiding. Maya stood with everyone else, but she noticed something that others missed, the slight pause in the judge's step when his eyes fell on her, the almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Your Honor," Harold began as soon as the preliminaries were complete, "before we proceed with today's proceedings, I feel compelled to express my deep concern about the qualifications of opposing counsel. This is an extraordinarily complex corporate litigation case involving intricate federal employment law, statistical analysis of hiring patterns, and sophisticated legal theories that require years of specialized experience." Judge Harrison leaned forward with interest, his expression suggesting he was already inclined to agree. "Continue, Mr. Wellington." "Your Honor, I question whether someone so obviously inexperienced should be handling such serious allegations against a major corporation. The potential damages being sought are in the hundreds of millions. My client deserves adequate representation from opposing counsel, and frankly, I'm not sure we're going to get that today." Maya remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She had expected this. In fact, she had counted on it. Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses and looked down at Maya with barely concealed annoyance. "Ms." He paused, checking his paperwork with exaggerated slowness, as if her name were somehow difficult to locate. "Johnson, Your Honor. Maya Alexandra Johnson." "Ms. Johnson," Judge Harrison's voice carried the tone of a parent addressing a misbehaving child. "I have to say I share Mr. Wellington's concerns. This case involves extraordinarily intricate corporate law, complex employment regulations, and federal discrimination statutes that have been evolving for decades. Are you quite certain you're adequately prepared to handle such complexity?" Maya stood slowly, her posture straight and confident. "I am fully prepared, Your Honor." Judge Harrison's expression hardened. The audacity of this young woman to speak so confidently in his courtroom when she so clearly didn't belong there was almost insulting. "I've been on this bench for 23 years, young lady, and I can spot inexperience and overconfidence from a mile away. They often go hand in hand, and they both do a disservice to justice." A ripple of laughter went through the gallery, where several attorneys had gathered to watch what they expected to be a one-sided legal demolition. "Your credentials, please," Judge Harrison demanded, extending his hand with the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Maya reached into her worn briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. As she approached the bench, several attorneys in the gallery exchanged amused glances and knowing smiles. Patricia Morse pulled out her phone, clearly preparing to text colleagues about the entertainment they were missing. "Georgetown University Law Center, Your Honor. Graduated magna cum laude, Order of the Coif. Served as editor of the Georgetown Law Journal." Judge Harrison barely glanced at the diploma before setting it aside dismissively. Georgetown has clearly lowered their standards considerably in recent years. Academic performance and real-world legal competence are entirely different things, Ms. Johnson. What is your actual experience with corporate litigation of this magnitude? "Extensive, Your Honor." Judge Harrison let out a sound that was almost a snort. "Define extensive for the court, counselor, and please be specific, because I suspect your definition and mine may differ considerably." Maya met his gaze steadily, her voice calm and clear. I've successfully argued and won 12 federal employment discrimination cases at the district level, secured favorable outcomes in 8 Supreme Court appeals, authored the legal strategy that resulted in the precedent-setting decision in Morrison versus Tech Industries, and established the legal framework that fundamentally changed how employment discrimination is prosecuted in federal court. The laughter in the courtroom died instantly. Harold Wellington's confident smile faltered as he began frantically shuffling through papers. Judge Harrison blinked rapidly, clearly taken aback by the specificity and scope of her claims. "I'm sorry. What did you say about Morrison versus Tech Industries?" "Morrison versus Tech Industries, Your Honor, a landmark 2019 decision that revolutionized employment discrimination law. Perhaps you're familiar with it?" Maya paused, watching recognition slowly dawn on Judge Harrison's face like a terrible sunrise. "You were the presiding judge whose dismissal was overturned by the Supreme Court, unanimously, with a strongly worded criticism of the lower court's reasoning." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and whispered conversations. Harold Wellington dropped his pen. Patricia Morse's phone slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers. Judge Harrison's face went through a remarkable transformation, from pale to red to something approaching purple. Morrison vs. Tech Industries had been the most humiliating moment of his career. He had dismissed the case without trial, calling the discrimination claims frivolous and without merit, only to watch the Supreme Court not only overturn his decision, but issue a blistering rebuke of his fundamental misunderstanding of basic civil rights law. "That's absolutely impossible," Judge Harrison stammered, his usual commanding presence reduced to confused protest. The attorney in that case was M.A. Johnson, one of the most respected and feared civil rights lawyers in the entire country, someone with a national reputation who commands fees that— "Maya Alexandra Johnson, Your Honor," Maya interrupted quietly. "M.A. Johnson, though I can certainly understand the confusion. People very often expect M.A. Johnson to be a middle-aged white man in an expensive suit, not a young black woman who shops at thrift stores and carries a briefcase held together with electrical tape." The silence that followed was so complete that Maya could hear the air conditioning system humming in the walls. Harold Wellington looked like he had been struck by lightning. Patricia Morse had gone completely pale. Thomas Richardson was staring at Maya as if she had just announced she was from another planet. "You're telling me," Judge Harrison said very slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "that you are M.A. Johnson? The M.A. Johnson who has won every major discrimination case for the past 5 years. The M.A. Johnson whose legal briefs are studied in law schools across the country. The M.A. Johnson who made you look like a fool in front of the entire legal community," Maya finished gently. "Yes, Your Honor, that would be me. Though I prefer Maya. M.A. Johnson is just what I use professionally to avoid exactly what happened when I walked into this courtroom this morning." Harold Wellington stood up abruptly, his face flushed with something between panic and disbelief. "Your Honor, I need to request an immediate continuance. My client needs time to prepare for—" "To prepare for what, Mr. Wellington?" Maya interrupted, turning to face him with a smile that was both professional and predatory. "To prepare for the inevitable. You see, I've spent the last 18 months doing something you clearly didn't think was necessary. I've been building an absolutely airtight case." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder that was considerably thicker than it had appeared. "I have documented testimony from 47 current and former Williams Industries employees. I have internal emails dating back 7 years showing systematic exclusion of qualified black candidates. I have financial records demonstrating statistically impossible pay disparities. I have promotion data that reveals a pattern of discrimination so clear it could be seen from space." Maya paused and reached back into her briefcase. "And I have something else, Mr. Wellington. Something I think you'll find particularly interesting, given that your client has been paying you 7 figures to make this case disappear quietly." She pulled out a small digital recording device and held it up for the court to see. "This is a conversation between your client, Mr. Williams, and his HR director from exactly 3 weeks ago. Would you like me to play it for the court, or would you prefer to hear it privately first?" Harold Wellington's face went completely white. His hands were actually shaking as he reached for his water glass. Your Honor, any such recording would be inadmissible without proper chain of custody documentation and— Oh, but I have all of that, Maya said cheerfully, producing another folder. You see, when you're M.A. Johnson, you learn to be very, very thorough. The conversation was recorded legally, with proper consent from one party, the HR director, who contacted me directly after being asked to implement what she considered illegal hiring policies. Maya pressed play. The voice of Robert Williams, CEO of Williams Industries, filled the courtroom with crystal clarity. I don't care what the lawyers say about federal law, Margaret. I will not have these people thinking they can just waltz into executive positions because they have college degrees. Keep them in manufacturing where they belong. Our shareholders don't want to see a black face representing their investments. The courtroom exploded. Reporters frantically scribbled notes. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel repeatedly, but the damage was already done. Harold Wellington looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. There's more, Maya continued, raising her voice slightly over the commotion. Mr. Williams goes on to discuss specific strategies for avoiding hiring qualified black candidates, including what he calls cultural fit assessments that are clearly discriminatory under federal law. She pressed play again. Williams's voice continued. And if anyone asks about discrimination, we just say they weren't qualified. Who's going to believe them over us? We've got Harvard lawyers on retainer. Harold Wellington slumped into his chair, his $3,000 suit suddenly looking like it was made of cardboard. Your Honor, he said weakly, Williams Industries would like to explore settlement options. Maya shook her head firmly. No settlement, Mr. Wellington. My clients didn't come here for money. They came here for justice. They want the world to know exactly what Williams Industries thinks of black employees, and they want to make sure it never happens again. Judge Harrison found himself in the extraordinary position of presiding over a case where he had already been publicly humiliated by the opposing attorney he had just dismissed as incompetent. Ms. Johnson, he said carefully, how do you wish to proceed? I'd like to present my case in full, Your Honor, starting with the statistical analysis of Williams Industries' hiring practices over the past decade. For the next 4 hours, Maya systematically dismantled Williams Industries' defense with a precision that left even seasoned attorneys speechless. Her cross-examination of company executives was surgical in its effectiveness. She knew details about the company's operations that their own lawyers hadn't uncovered. Every objection Harold Wellington raised was overruled after Maya cited case law that perfectly supported her position. She presented charts showing that despite a qualified applicant pool that was 23% black, Williams Industries management was less than 3% black. She introduced internal performance evaluations showing that black employees consistently outperformed their white counterparts, but were promoted at less than half the rate. Mr. Williams, Maya said during her cross-examination of the CEO, you testified that hiring decisions at your company are based purely on merit. Is that correct? Yes, absolutely. Then perhaps you can explain why Jennifer Hamilton, a black woman with an MBA from Wharton and 10 years of relevant experience, was passed over for promotion 6 times in favor of white candidates with less education and experience. Williams shifted uncomfortably. I don't recall the specific case you're referring to. Maya walked to her table and picked up a thick file. I have Ms. Hamilton's performance reviews here. Would you like me to read them to the court? 5 years of exceeds expectations ratings, commendations from clients, recommendations from supervisors, yet somehow she was never quite ready for management. There must have been other factors. Yes, there were other factors, Maya interrupted. According to your own emails, which we've subpoenaed, the factor was that promoting her would send the wrong message to shareholders about company culture. The cross-examination continued for 2 hours. By the end, Robert Williams was sweating visibly. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. During the lunch break, something unprecedented happened. Judge Harrison approached Maya at the plaintiff's table. Ms. Johnson, I owe you a profound apology. Maya looked up from her notes. You owe my clients justice, Your Honor. The apology is appreciated, but it's not what we came here for. I have to ask, Judge Harrison said quietly, why the secrecy? Why practice under your initials for all these years? Maya smiled sadly. Because of exactly what happened this morning, Your Honor. When people see Maya Johnson, a young black woman, they see someone to be dismissed, questioned, or patronized. When they see M.A. Johnson on a legal brief, they see someone to be feared and respected. I got tired of fighting prejudice before I could even fight my cases. Judge Harrison nodded slowly. I've made a terrible mistake today. Yes, you have. But today you have the opportunity to make it right. When court resumed, Maya delivered her closing argument. For 55 minutes she spoke without notes, weaving together law, evidence, and moral clarity in a way that left the entire courtroom spellbound. Even Harold Wellington found himself nodding at certain points, recognizing brilliance even as it destroyed his case. Your Honor, Maya concluded, this case is about more than Williams Industries. It's about whether we will tolerate a system that judges people by their appearance rather than their abilities. Whether we will accept that talent and intelligence come in only one color, one gender, one acceptable package. My clients are asking this court to say, clearly and definitively, that discrimination has no place in American business, and that justice should not depend on whether a lawyer looks like what people expect a lawyer to look like. Judge Harrison retired to his chambers for exactly 47 minutes. When he returned, his decision was swift, comprehensive, and devastating to Williams Industries. The company was found guilty on all counts of systematic discrimination. The financial penalties exceeded $200 million. The injunctive relief required complete restructuring of their hiring and promotion practices under federal oversight. But more importantly, Judge Harrison took the unusual step of reading a personal statement. This court has learned something important today. We have learned that brilliance comes in many forms and that our assumptions about competence based on appearance can blind us to extraordinary talent. Ms. Johnson, you have not only won this case, you have educated everyone in this courtroom about the dangers of prejudice, including the presiding judge. As the courtroom cleared, Harold Wellington approached Maya. I have to ask, he said quietly, how long have you been planning this? The reveal, the dramatic moment when you showed us who you really were. Maya packed her briefcase methodically. Mr. Wellington, I didn't plan anything dramatic. I came here to do my job. You and Judge Harrison turned it into theater by assuming I was incompetent based on how I look. The drama was your creation, not mine. She paused at the courtroom door. Maybe next time, you'll judge a lawyer by their arguments instead of their appearance. You might be surprised by what you discover. 3 months later, Maya Johnson was featured on the cover of Legal Times magazine. The headline read, "The Hidden Genius: How M.A. Johnson Changed Corporate Law While Fighting Prejudice in Plain Sight." The article detailed not only her legal victories, but her conscious decision to practice under her initials to avoid the very discrimination she fought against in courtrooms across the country. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Law schools began requiring courses on unconscious bias. Bar associations implemented new guidelines for professional conduct. Major law firms started examining their own hiring and promotion practices. Judge Harrison requested a private meeting with Maya before her next case in his courtroom. I've spent considerable time reflecting on our encounter, he said. I want you to know that I've enrolled in unconscious bias training. I've also asked the Judicial Council to implement similar training for all judges in the circuit. Maya nodded. We all have prejudices, Your Honor. The question is what we do when they're brought to our attention. I also want you to know that I've recommended you for appointment to the State Civil Rights Commission. It's time people like you had a voice in shaping policy. People like me? Maya asked with a slight smile. Judge Harrison paused, understanding the trap in the question. Brilliant lawyers who fight for justice, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. That's much better, Maya replied. A year later, Maya established the M.A. Johnson Foundation, providing scholarships and mentorship for young lawyers from underrepresented communities. Her first scholarship recipient was a young Latina woman who had been told by her high school guidance counselor that she didn't look like lawyer material. The best revenge, Maya told the scholarship recipients at their first meeting, isn't proving people wrong about you. It's making sure the next person doesn't have to face the same prejudices you did. It's changing the system so that talent is recognized regardless of the package it comes in. Harold Wellington, meanwhile, left his corporate defense firm and started a practice focused on employment discrimination cases, representing plaintiffs. Maya Johnson taught me that the law isn't about winning at any cost, he explained to a reporter. It's about justice. And sometimes justice means admitting when you've been fundamentally wrong about everything you thought you knew. Williams Industries never recovered from the case. Their stock price plummeted 40% in the weeks following the verdict. Key executives resigned in disgrace. The company eventually filed for bankruptcy protection, but not before paying the full judgment to Maya's clients. The employees who had been discriminated against used their settlement money to start their own businesses, creating jobs and opportunities in communities that had been systematically overlooked for decades. Jennifer Hamilton, the Wharton MBA, who had been passed over 6 times, started a consulting firm that now advises Fortune 500 companies on diversity and inclusion. Maya's story became required reading in law schools across the country, not just for its legal brilliance, but for what it taught about assumptions, prejudice, and the danger of judging people by their appearance rather than their abilities. Judge Harrison, who had once dismissed Maya as an inexperienced public defender, now kept a framed copy of her Supreme Court victory in Morrison v. Tech Industries on his desk. Underneath it, a small plaque read, "Talent has no color. Brilliance has no background. Justice has no prejudice." The security guard who had questioned Maya's credentials on that first morning was promoted to head of courthouse security. He now personally ensures that every attorney who enters the building is treated with respect, regardless of how they look or what they're wearing. "You never know," he tells his staff, "who might change the world. And more importantly, everyone deserves respect until they prove they don't deserve it, not the other way around." Patricia Morse, who had whispered cruel comments about Maya's appearance, found herself facing a discrimination lawsuit from her own law firm's black associates. The case was settled quietly, but her partnership was revoked. 5 years later, Maya Johnson, no longer hiding behind initials, was nominated to the Federal Appeals Court. During her confirmation hearings, Judge Harrison testified on her behalf. "Maya Johnson taught me the most important lesson of my career," he told the Senate Judiciary Committee. "She taught me that justice is blind, but judges shouldn't be. We must see clearly who stands before us, not our assumptions about who they should be." Maya's confirmation was unanimous. If this story of prejudice transformed into justice touched your heart, remember that brilliance comes in many forms and from many backgrounds. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone chooses to underestimate. True justice isn't just about winning cases. It's about changing hearts, minds, and systems so that talent can flourish regardless of the package it comes in. The next time you meet someone, look beyond the surface. Listen to their words, judge their actions, evaluate their ideas. You might just discover that the person you were ready to dismiss could change your world, and maybe the whole world, if given the chance. Maya Johnson proved that hiding your light under a bushel might sometimes be necessary for survival, but eventually, that light will shine so brightly that no amount of prejudice can dim it. And when it does, it illuminates not just the truth about you, but the truth about everyone who chose to see you as less than you are. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.